This meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. This is a continuation of a public hearing in connection with the 40B application. My understanding is that the applicant is requesting a continuance this evening and an extension of the 180-day period for a public hearing in connection with the application. But before we get to that, I just had a couple of initial questions that I wanted to pose to Mr. Schomer when with the applicant. So as you know, we've been through quite a few public hearings over a lengthy period of time, going over a plan and the details concerning that plan, and a considerable amount of time and effort and expense was put into that process. We now understand that largely all of that previous activity has gone for naught because there's what I see as a completely different plan that has been submitted to the board. So the first question I guess I have for you, Mr. Schomer, is the original plan that we spent some many weeks on studying and evaluating and hearing testimony about, is that plan withdrawn?
At this stage, Mr. Hurley, good evening to you and the other members. At this point, the applicant's intent is to replace the existing plan that we have proposed once a revised plan is ready for submission to the board for both sites. And as you know, as you mentioned, the applicant has requested a continuance of tonight's hearing for a significant amount of time for the revised project plans to be finished and fully realized with all disciplines updating their plans to incorporate both 648 and 652 Canton Avenue. And while that process is playing out, Mr. Chair, what I intend to do is to reach out to Mass Housing to get confirmation of a previous conversation that we had with them, that the addition of the land area of 652 Canton Avenue would not constitute a significant change of this project, and that the findings of site eligibility that were previously issued by Mass Housing would remain. And at that time, once we have confirmation of that, we would intend to withdraw the application for site eligibility for 652 Canton Avenue and file the updated plans for both sites. And at that time, Mr. Chair, we would be formally withdrawing the previous plans as our plans of record.
Do you foresee a set of circumstances under which you would go forward with the original plan?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
When you like to put those kind of little extra words on there, not at this time. So there could be a time in the future that you would want to go forward with the existing plan?
I don't believe that's the case, Mr. Hurley.
Is there a set of circumstances under which MHFA could take some action, as friendly as they often are to 40B applicants, under which you would be put in a position where you'd have to go forward with the original plan?
I don't know the answer to that, Mr. Hurley. What I can tell you is that the applicant does not intend to go forward with the plan as we have previously proposed at the point where we have Mass Housing approval to proceed under the original site eligibility letter. I don't mean to be evasive by that answer. I don't want to box us into a set of circumstances where I've given you an answer and we have to change that answer. But what I can tell the members of the board and Mr. Cochran and his clients and members of the public is that the applicant has heard the feedback from the community and from town officials and the town's peer reviewers and the members yourselves. We've heard you loud and clear that the proposal that we originally submitted is not something that the town is comfortable with at this stage. And we are attempting to do our best to respond to that feedback and come back with a plan that will meet with the board satisfaction and hopefully with the neighborhood satisfaction as well.
Okay, so have you actually submitted anything to Mass Housing in connection with this? Is there some form of letter or application that you submitted to Mass Housing addressing these points that you've articulated this evening?
No, Mr. Chair. Our intent would be to file something with Mass Housing probably towards the end of next week. We have had initial conversations with them However, they were not willing to put anything in writing formally at this stage until they have at least a conceptual plan on more or less on the same level as what would be submitted with a project eligibility letter application. But we intend to be filing that with them sometime next week.
And you would anticipate that you get some kind of a written response from Mass Housing in connection with that application?
That would be our expectation, certainly our hope, and we will be requesting that.
Would you be willing to file with the board the copy of the letter that you sent to MHF Mass Housing as well as the response when you get it?
Absolutely, yes.
Do any of the other board members have any questions about any of the subjects that we've talked about so far? Mr. David or Mr. Brown? Mr. Corcoran, do you have any
Not at this
questions?
point. Not at
Okay,
this-
thank you. Thank you, Mr. David.
Yes.
Mr. Corcoran?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We've have this for quite a while. This original plan was filed a year ago. Project eligibility application was filed with Mass Development on December 18 for 652 Canton Avenue. We filed a motion the start of this hearing requesting the board to stay the start of this hearing pending determination from Mass Housing whether 652 should be incorporated into this project. Seems to me the board should deny this request for continuance. And the applicant should refile based on whatever determination that it receives for whatever project Mass Development determines to be eligible under this new plan. Otherwise, we're sitting here in limbo without knowing what's going to happen. It's a waste of this board's time. And it's a waste, again, of my client's time and money. We have no preconception about the number of units or the layout of this, what a final project might look like. There are serious issues to be considered, including stormwater, wetlands impacts, etc. All of that ought to be considered initially by Mass Housing. Mass Housing ought to be issuing a new project eligibility determination for this new project as is proposed. And if such determination is made, the applicant should then file a new application for a new comprehensive permit. I don't see any basis for continuing this pending some back and forth between the applicant and Mass Housing. We ought to know what we're starting with. This board ought to know what it's starting with. We ought to be waiting. We ought to wait for determination from Mass Housing as to what is applicable. That's the ticket to entry. The determination of applicability is what gives them the right to file. They don't have that for this project. They need to get that for whatever project they want to pursue. And then they should file a new application. Should start over. We ought not to be continuing pending whatever back and forth might be happening with Mass Development.
Well, under that scenario, Mr. Corcoran, what do you think would happen? Should the board then, if Mr. Shoma says, well, we don't have any further information to present with respect to this application that we don't intend to go forward with, would you anticipate that we close the public hearing and then issue a decision with respect to this application?
I would close the public hearing and issue a decision with a whole lot of conditions attached to it. Clear that they cannot build the project.
For a project that the applicant has no intention to build.
Correct. If they have no intention to build, let them start over. But let's start a new process.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. Mr. David, Mr. Brown, you have any thoughts on that proposal and sentiment?
It's an interesting idea. The problem that I see us running into is that the deadline to close this hearing is next Tuesday, and Mr. Schomer says that he intends to file the letter next Wednesday. And I'm choosing not to read too much into that. If we had a little more time, I think the way that I would like to approach it would be to grant a request for a continuance until our last day to have this hearing, and then address it, and we'll have the benefit of Mass Housing's position on this issue. Unfortunately, the way this is played out doesn't allow us that opportunity, and I think that's regrettable. And I think we're in a real bind here. So just speaking out loud, I think Mr. Corcoran's request has merit, although practically speaking, I don't know if it makes sense to issue a decision on a project that the applicant doesn't intend to build. I think that the cleaner way of doing this would be for Mr. Schomer to withdraw the application and refile. Those are my thoughts.
Mr. Daver?
I would agree that that's the cleaner way. Are you saying, Mike, that under the regulations, the public hearing has to close by what, next Tuesday? Are you saying the 15th? I thought it was later than that.
So the decision is not due until July 23rd. My notes say that the last day to close the hearing is June 15th. And Judy, I would pass this question over to you.
Well, in his letter, Mr. Schomer can speak for himself on this, but I thought his letter said that the deadline to close the public hearing was Monday, July 12th.
I'm just double checking my notes here. You can hold on a sec.
Mr. Schomer, did I read that? Did I miss that?
You read that correctly, Mr. Hurley. That's my understanding, but I will defer, of course, to Ms. Barrett, who's correct in all such things.
Not sure about that. My record is July 10th.
Okay.
I believe that's a Saturday, so we moved it forward to the Monday.
Of course, right. I literally just did the 180-day count and plugged it in. So,
Okay.
So Mike, it would be July 12th.
Okay, thank you. And I withdraw my early criticism of the timing, Mr. Schomer.
Well, thank you, Mr. Brown. And just to be clear, in my letter, we did agree that we're willing to extend the 180-day period to October the 19th at this point. And so really what we're trying to do is maintain the status quo with the hearing, keeping it open at this stage. That would be our intent. We're not trying to tick away at the board's time to review and deliberate on this matter. And if we get to September and there's more time that's needed for additional review, we'd be open to further extensions of that time.
But
Mr. Schomer, let me ask you this question. It certainly seems like it would be more orderly if this application was withdrawn and a new one was submitted. And I've heard it said, and I don't quite understand what the reference is, but I've heard it said that you can't do that because that would take you out of the queue. Do you know what that means?
I don't know what that means, Mr. Chair.
So you're not in some kind of a line of approvals with Mass Housing that you'd fall out of the line and go to the end of the line if you withdrew, as opposed to keeping this old application alive, even though it's substantially different than the one that you're actually proposing to go forward with. Is there some advantage to that I'm just not seeing?
I'm not aware of one, Mr. Chair. I'm not aware of any queue that Mass Housing has. I know that they have another number of projects that they are reviewing at the moment, and I understand that a project was recently filed with the town in April. I don't know if that's Mass Housing or Mass Development or some other subsidizing agency, though. That's not our consideration for the way that we're proposing to proceed.
What is the consideration? Why do it this way? It just seems somewhat convoluted to me. To do it this way. And I'm not saying I'm going to vote against it, but I'm trying to understand it. And I think the public needs to understand why are we doing this way?
Well, Mr. Chair, what I would say is the reason why we're proposing to do it this way is, although I do take your point, Mr. Chair, that it seems like this is a completely new project and starting from square one, there are a lot of matters that have been reviewed and determined at this point through the peer review process that would be the same and relevant also to the revised project, with encompassing both land areas. There's a number of stormwater considerations, traffic considerations that would be unchanged. There's an additional possibility of providing a secondary access, which has come up a number of times if the 652 Avenue site is incorporated into this one. So from our perspective, there's not a strategic reason why we're proposing to proceed under this application as opposed to filing a new one. This is simply our preference to do it this way. We recognize that it seems like somewhat of an awkward procedural posture because of the issue with mass housing. And we fully recognize that there will be the likelihood of additional peer review fees where we have no objection to that, as we didn't in the beginning of this project.
Any other comments to Ned?
I'm just
Mike?
wondering whether this Q refers to need to refile. If they have to refile, maybe they get out of line for safe harbor purposes.
Well, that was sort of where I was headed with that, but I don't know how close we are to safe harbor. I think we're pretty far away. But I'll take Mr. Schumer at his word that there's no sort of insidious motivation for going forward in the fashion that he suggests. My personal inclination, and I defer to my fellow board members, my personal inclination is to go ahead and continue the hearing. I don't really see much point in sort of forcing the issue and finding ourselves in a position that we're going to deny an application that the applicant doesn't even want to do, and all the sort of turmoil that would be associated with taking that approach. But on the other hand, I think that to come back late in the summer with new information and to have a hearing on September 7th, and then to go through the applicant's information that they're going to present. Presumably there's going to be some new and better and different groundwater and surface water information than we received in connection with the first application. And then it took us 3 or 4 public hearings dates to have peer review people testify and town officials testify, and then to leave a hearing date or 2 for the members of the public to come in and have their say or their input with respect to the final plan that comes in front of us. So I think the October 19th date is a very unrealistic and frankly unacceptable date, at least to me and probably to the rest of the board members. So I'd be looking for something end of November after Thanksgiving or early December as a date rather than the October 19th date. And then we would close the public hearing by that point and then have our 40 days to do the decision. So, I mean, that's Mr. Schomer would be my inclination, but I'd like to hear from Mr. Daver and Mr. Brown with their thoughts.
I mean, I agree. This is going to be essentially or mostly a new application, and I see no reason why there should be less time afforded to review of what comes next than what we did in the winter and spring this year. So I think that we would need it till at least the beginning of December.
That would be my thought. Mr. Daver?
I would agree with that time for ending the hearings. And this is again assuming that the hearings start again on the 7th and that all plans are filed by July 30th and peer review is completed by September 7th. Is that?
Yeah, that was my
understanding correctly.
Mr. Schomer, when would you anticipate having all the information filed with the town so that we could put it in the hands of the peer reviewers?
Mr. Chair, we intend to file everything with the town and the town's peer reviewers by July the 30th. And the intent of that would be to put the revised plans into the hands of the peer reviewers to get them started reviewing that, because we know that they're extremely busy at the moment. All of them are. There have been challenges getting them getting their time for this project and others that they're reviewing as well in the town. So the time period between July 30th and September 7th, the intent of that was to have that entire 5+ week period for all the peer reviewers to review the materials, come back to us with their comments, give us a chance to review those comments and respond to them if appropriate, and then come back to the board, hopefully with a set of plans that's seen the peer review and perhaps at some point thereafter will be improved, and we'd be able to be further forward in the process than I think we were previously in the hearing, where we were going sort of in a piecemeal process where we come in and then 2 weeks later the peer reviewers come in and then we come in 2 weeks after that. So really our intent, Mr. Chair and members, we're trying to streamline the process, and that's the reason why we suggested that the 6 week period following September 7th would be an appropriate amount of time, because hopefully once we come back in on September 7th, peer review will be well in process at that point.
Again, Mr. Sherman, I appreciate what you're saying. I just think it's an unrealistic time frame, and I'd like to suggest to you that we agree to whatever that first Tuesday in December is as the extension date. And I don't have a calendar with me, but that would be my suggestion. And it seems that Mr. Brown and Mr. David are in agreement with me on that.
I mean, that would be essentially a 90-day public hearing period from the start of the new application.
Right, which is not an extraordinary amount of time.
No, it isn't. It's half the normal
Right.
hearing period. So it's one thing, Mr. Schomer, I agree, getting the plans to the peer reviewers early is helpful, but the public hearing is for the public hearing. And so until you have the public comments for the board to hear and so forth, you haven't really had the public hearing. I think we just need to be careful that the board isn't put in a position where this all becomes simply a grand technical conversation between technical consultants and the public hasn't had the opportunity for input.
Good point. Do you think that first Tuesday in September is enough?
You mean through the first Tuesday in December? Is that what
December, yes.
90 days? I mean, I would think that would be adequate. As Attorney Schomer points out, there has been, some prior discussion about the plan, albeit the changes. And so all we're saying is, half the typical hearing period.
Right. I want
asking to restart the 180 days.
I want the public to have an opportunity to do this. It's just not about peer reviewers. I mean, there's other, points of view and interests that are involved here. So I really would like to stick to that first Tuesday in December as the extension date, and would hope that Mr. Schomer and his client can agree to that.
Yeah.
Could I make one other suggestion, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
That this board can convene in July for a report from Mr. Schomer regarding where mass development stands on this application?
Do you think we need to convene in July? I'm personally in July. I'm going to be spending a fair amount of time on Martha's Vineyard.
I'm hoping to do something similar.
I don't plan to be to this.
I think
it's fair to have a written report by July 12th of where you stand. Is that, Mr. Schomer, is that doable?
That's doable, Mr. Chair. I think that's perfectly reasonable.
That would be great.
Thank you.
So we would get a written missive from Mr. Schomer on or before Monday, July 12th, that would set out for us where things stand with the mass housing process.
Yes, that's agreed, Mr. Chair.
That's fine, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Schomer, can we agree to that first Tuesday in December? I don't have a calendar, so I don't know what that date is, but can we agree to that as the extension date for the public hearing?
At this stage, Mr. Chair, I don't have authorization from my clients to extend beyond what was the date I said in my letter, Tuesday, October the 19th. But I will speak with them following tonight's hearing, and perhaps I can address this in my July 12 letter to the board. As I said before, I think that as we move forward with the public hearing process, if we're moving in the direction and it's a productive conversation and it appears that there are additional matters that still need to be resolved, if there's additional time that's needed for public comment, additional time needed for town department head comment, and perhaps additional peer review, we may be willing to further extend, but at this point, October 19th is the date I've been authorized.
Well, they're on
I
the
see-
right now. I mean, they're
I
here.
see both of the Tamposis are on the board. I mean,
Ask them.
so what's going to happen in the event that next week you write to us or call us up and say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to stick with the October date. That date's not acceptable to the board. I mean, period. And so if we can't agree to that, then you put us in a position then where maybe what we'll do is have a public hearing and deny the application and do a written decision to that effect. I mean, it seems to me that's your option. So I think your clients need to tell us tonight that they
Right.
agree to the December date, because I'm not going to leave it open to the possibility that you disagree. And then
Right.
we've closed the public hearing tonight. I'm not going to do that.
Wasted
So
everybody's time again.
I'm not going to do that. So either we get an agreement to that tonight, or we'll suspend tonight, and we'll figure out what we're going to do. But maybe we'll come back and have a public hearing, and we'll vote, because the plan that's before us right now would never be approved by this board, and you know that, because if it was a decent plan, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. So we're not going to play this game. So either agree to the first Tuesday in December, or we'll do something different. And the both Tamposis, I can see the names right in front of me here. They can speak to this issue.
Mr. Chair, I'll leave it up to my clients if they choose to participate at this time. I have expressed what I am authorized to do at this point.
Okay, I understand.
The board has its prerogative. If it chooses to close the public hearing and vote on this application, it's within its prerogative to do so.
No, what we'll do is we'll schedule another public hearing. We'll have the public have a final opportunity to speak on this application that's in front of us, and then we'll close the public hearing, and then we'll issue a decision. But again, I mean, I think you know what that decision is going to be, and that's the way you want to go, and you want to go to the Housing Appeals Committee with a plan that you implicitly acknowledge is no good. Then be my guest. But that's the way this is going to go. So either the Tamposis tell us tonight that the first Tuesday in December is okay, or we'll go in a different direction.
I think Mr. Tamposi has his hand raised, Brian.
Okay, somebody can recognize him.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
Able to speak, yeah.
This is Joe Tamposi speaking.
Good evening, Mr. Tamposi.
Good evening. So, just to, address some of the concerns that the board has raised with an October 19th date. It sounds like the thinking was that we wanted to have 90 days, from the opening of the public, reopening of the public hearing to allow, sufficient time for the public to participate. And, we totally agree with that. I think that, that makes perfect sense, that the public should have opportunity to participate. But, what may be lost or, perhaps being overlooked a little bit is that our plan is to file the revised plans on July 30th. And the reasoning for, for waiting the 5 weeks was so that peer review would have time. I'm wondering if perhaps, some of the board's concern could be alleviated if, rather than waiting until September 7th to continue public hearings, we would have a number of public hearings in the month of August. And that would allow, additional participation. And if, there are items that need to be addressed that come up from those hearings based on the revised plans that are filed July 30th, then we would have, sufficient time to address them without, extending beyond what's necessary. So that was one consideration, and I'm not sure if the board has thoughts on that.
I don't know. You welcome thoughts from everyone else here, but August is a difficult month. Lots of people are on vacation. I want the public to have a full opportunity to talk about and understand the plan that we still don't have, but that you will be proposing. And so I'm not wildly enthusiastic about doing this in August. I can't speak for everyone else. Mr. Tamposi, what is the problem with going to early December, 5 or 6 weeks, given how long this has taken to evolve? I can't understand what the big deal is about that.
No, I think that it's a discussion that we want to have. We, you know, we didn't want to get into a situation where we're, you know, extending beyond, you know, where we thought we may be having productive hearings. But, you know, we hear what you're saying, Mr. Chair, and what the rest of the board's saying, and what Ms. Barrett said. And, you know, I think kind of given that information, we're willing to extend until Tuesday, December 7th, if that's the pleasure of the board. You know, we're not trying to get into an argument over, you know, how much time is sufficient. I
And
think,
I appreciate that. And to use your words, it is the pleasure of the board that it be Tuesday, December 7th. So why don't we just agree on that? You know, and if we can finish it before that, then
Thank you.
great. But let's set that as the outside date. And hopefully all of this will unfold in the way that you envision, which is that we get the information early, it gets to our peer reviewers have time to review it. Everyone has a chance to come back as we did on the original plan, have a full vetting of all issues with peer reviewers and members of the public and town officials, including the fire chief and others who have previously testified. And that, as I said, that took some period of time. And we'll move as expeditiously as we can. I mean, it's not our interest here to drag this out. But on the other hand, we don't want to set constraints on ourselves that are unrealistic and unreasonable. So thank you for agreeing to Tuesday, December 7th, and that's what we'll do.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
So I don't forget. So what happens if in the interim, Mass Housing does not issue a project eligibility letter, let's say, or says it's a substantial change? And
I'll let Mr. Schomer answer that.
we're supposed to get a report on that, but then should we have something scheduled for?
I don't think we should schedule anything, but Mr. Schomer, what say you to that? What happens? I mean, I think it's unlikely, frankly, that this is going to happen, but what would happen? How would this unfold if Mass Housing said, no, you got to start over with this?
Well, I think, Mr. Chair, I think what would happen is we'd have to assess what to do at that point. I agree with you. I think it's very unlikely that they would make any kind of determination like that. We've had a preliminary conversation with them about it. And typically these kind of matters are done by Mass Housing. They're handled through the final approval process. And they did give assurances to us verbally, though not formally in writing. That's how it would be done in this case as well. If they were to change their mind on that, that would have implications for the site eligibility of this entire project. And so at that point, that's what we would be reporting to the board in our July 12 letter.
And presumably we would have that information in that report, certainly in advance of the September 7th hearing that we're contemplating.
Definitely, Mr. Chair.
So in a worst case scenario, Mass Housing surprises everyone and says, no, you got to start over again. Then we would know that when we came together on September 7th, and we could deal with it accordingly at that time.
That's my understanding, Mr. Chair. Yes.
I think that would work, Mr. David. I don't think we have to schedule anything in the interim.
I suspected that's what would happen. I just wanted to.
No, I'm glad you did.
No, for sure.
It was a good point. So, okay, anything further that we need to discuss or cover?
No, I don't believe on our end, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Schomer, I thank you as always for your cool and dispassionate treatment of these issues. And I appreciate everyone else's input. So for the time being, then the next public hearing will be scheduled for Tuesday, September 7th. And the time for the public hearing process will be extended until that first Tuesday in December, whatever, December 5th or whatever date that is. And we will go from there. And I think, Mr. Schomer, the faster you get the information to the town and to its peer reviewers, the more likely it is that we can move along expeditiously with this.
Mr.
Agreed.
Chair, it appears that Tim Zerwinski may have his hand up. on the town.
Okay, we can,
Thanks, Ned.
can you let him in?
Hi,
Tim
Mr.
is
Chair,
on.
I'm in.
Yeah.
I don't think this is something we can or should settle right now, but because I'm just thinking about this for my own public hearings that I'm running. Between now and September, there may be some new guidance as to whether or not these hearings can continue in a remote fashion or will need to be in person. I don't know if there are implications for kind of the continuing to a date certain that we do here tonight, or if there's going to have to be another kind of advertisement of this. I don't know. It might not be a big deal, but I just wanted to kind of raise the issue just so that someone is thinking about it.
Right, I know that's under consideration, whether to mandate that we go back to public hearings in person. I don't, it hasn't been decided yet, but I guess, Tim, I guess we'll just deal with that as it evolves.
If I may, on that, at that point, Mr. Chair, I do think, given the significant delay between tonight and September 7th, it may be worthwhile to reissue notices, and we would be willing to bear the cost of doing that.
I think that's a good idea, Bev.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Particularly if they're, because, you know, who knows how many people have been able to tune in tonight, and
Oh,
things
no.
get, things get lost over the summer. So I
Yeah.
think we should publish a notice of public hearing for Tuesday, September 7th. I think that's a very good idea.
And that won't be done until August, okay, because it's still way too early.
Okay, that's
Everybody
fine.
is fair with
You're
everything.
gonna put it on your master calendar though, and remember it?
Yeah, yes, I will, Brian.
I'm being only slightly facetious. Beth.
I understand.
All right, Tim, thank you for that suggestion and that observation, and I thank you all this evening. I hope you don't perceive that the board is trying to be difficult. We're just trying to be sure that we have enough time and that the public has enough time to absorb this project and proposal, and that we act, you know, appropriately in connection with the proposal. So thanks again to you all, and look forward to revisiting this subject on September 7th. Have a great summer.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm sorry, can I ask a quick question? I just noticed it is December 7th a Tuesday?
It is. I just looked. I think it is. Yes,
I thought I had checked that.
If September 7th.
it is a Tuesday. Yes,
Is September 7th?
September 7th is a Tuesday.
September 7th is a Tuesday, and December 7th is a Tuesday.
Okay, all right, good.
Is
Thank
that all
you.
right?
Sorry, yep.
December 7th is also Pearl Harbor Day. I just want to
Yeah,
remind you.
yeah, I know. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. I'll
you
see
very
you
much.
September 7th.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay,
Good night.
Bye.
good night.